Rick, you got one more in you?
I do indeed, Keith.
Awesome, man. I was listening to Audible with Michael Singer. He was doing his book. Um, it was a book or a lecture series from The Untethered Soul, which we both have read and really enjoyed. A lot of great lessons in that work. And one of the things that he said was things, people in life are not problems. They stimulate problems inside of you. And I just thought that that was so telling. It resonated with me. And so I'll kick us off, and then I'd love to see what you think. And what it did for me was it actually made me feel empowered, and that there was some self-efficacy there, in which that I was actually, had a really important role, or the sole role, in changing how I experience life, and knowing that if I worked on what was going on internally, then my problems, or majority of them, would fall away. And what I found is for that to be true for me along the way. And I can give several examples. One of which was a few years ago with the pandemic. I think we're in year 2 of the pandemic. And when I was working as a contractor for Mayo Clinic, and not as a full-time employee, that a lot of employees were had to take a 2-week furlough, and the company needed to take these measures to make sure that people would have employment, with the uncertainty, and to make sure that they were still financially solvent. And so, as a contractor, our contracts ended, and there was no indication that we would ever be called back.
Wow.
And so what it turned out for me was it was for over a year before I had an opportunity to come back to Mayo. And during that time, I asked, could I volunteer? Immediately when I got the phone call, is it okay if I volunteer? Is that possible? And
Wow.
so what I think about that is that could have easily have been a problem, to not be employed and getting paid from the company. But I didn't go to, like, how am I going to pay my rent, my mortgage? How am I going to live? What am I going to do about these living expenses? I'm in college right now, in grad school. What am I going to do here? Like, none of that came up for me. So I didn't create a problem at all, and before the practice, I certainly would have went to all those things about what am I going to do? This is a problem. It's the end of the world. But I didn't go there, and I think that's one of the examples that rings true, is that the problems, at least in my life, have been what's I've created inside with this narrative that my mind tells me is true, and then being so identified with it. That doesn't mean that there aren't challenges. I mean, certainly this was a challenge, but it was different for me. I still felt like I had some kind of choice and autonomy to create something out of what looked like lemons, and because of the practice, it wasn't me. It was my actions were being informed by way of the practice, because I brought to this particular challenge a peacefulness, a certain kind of resolve to take intelligent action with this particular set of challenges that ended up being a gift.
Boy, that's so true. I know exactly what you're talking about. I think that what you point your finger to, the idea that the problems and the stimulation of causing the narrative to come up for you, that stimulates the ego into bringing up all these defenses and the narrative, I can't do this, or this is a problem, all that judgment, that comes from you. That doesn't come from the problem or the circumstance. And, the real issue with a lot of this has to do with how do we overcome the obstacles that we put in our own way. A lot of what we talk about in these podcasts is about dealing with what is something that people don't recognize, and that is that you are the one who's causing the outcomes that you don't like, right?
Right.
I mean, the judgments that come up for you and the ways that you develop fear about things, that's you. That's not caused by the fact that you have to give a speech to 100 people. that's just a speech to 100 people. but for you, it's, oh my God, I'm going to be exposed as a fraud. They're going to see I stutter. I'm fat. I don't look right. I'm old. I have wrinkles. They're just, it's good. I don't want to do it. So you see what I mean? You talk yourself out of it. It's just talking to people. That's it. That's nothing more to it. I know, but seriously, I want to make sure that example holds for the point I'm trying to make, which is that getting out of your own way is very, very difficult, very difficult. But the first step is to say, I'm creating this fear. I'm creating this distance between myself and what I want because of something that's going on in my head, a narrative about what I am not or what I can't do or what I'm incapable of. If you could just begin to recognize, hey, this is just me. This is just me creating something that is an extra level of difficulty that I don't need. That's a start, just recognizing that that's what's happening. I think the other thing that might be helpful to people, and this is tough too, and that's the idea of detaching. You detach, you do the best that you can. You monitor all of your assets, all of your resources, and you apply them in a way that makes sense to solve the challenge that you've got. And then you have to detach from outcome, because that's a different deal. That's like me arguing to the jury. Once the argument is to the jury and I sit down, it's done. I might as well be anguished about the outcome of the Peloponnesian War. It's history. I can't do anything more about it, right? It's done. It's somebody else's deal that has to happen. And so I guess the idea that these problems that we have are so overwhelming is just wrong. The way to look at it is, this is a problem that's an enormous challenge, and here's what I can do to marshal my resources, get help from others if I can, and to do everything I can to bring to bear out a solution that's the greatest good for the greatest number of people involved. And then you got to detach, then you got to let it go. Hard to do, but I think that's the way to do it.
Right, exactly. I think it's hard to do, like you said in the beginning, but with practice, it just keeps becoming easier and easier and easier.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Once you get used to doing it, that's right.
Exactly. The key is to keep practicing. When I think about problems in my life, whether it's shown up as people or with life, and on paper, and the minute that I start to think about, a problem, the ego would say, but that is a problem. But I'm like, but my ego is so committed to being right. It's not committed to being free or being peaceful. So I don't listen to it. I don't listen to that narrative. It's just notorious for giving bad advice.
Yeah.
I began a while back using my mind for things that it could do. Like, go balance a checkbook, go. Yeah,
that's right.
Yeah, go write that paper for grad school. Go over there and go over there and create that PowerPoint presentation for the next talk. You go do that. But in terms of giving me advice about how to treat people, nah, we're not listening to you. You do nothing but burn relationships down and create your own little melodramas, and make people wrong. And so I don't give it that job anymore. But when I think about everything that's happened in my life, and I'll start with something that for the longest time, I experienced a lot of suffering from, and that was my childhood. I grew up in a very abusive home with my stepfather who, had struggled with alcoholism. And before the practice, I would have characterized him as being just a mean and evil person, who just was awful. But that would have been confusing the behavior with the person. And again, the moment that I do that, I lose the ability to see the humanity in him. It's just a person who was behaving in an unconscious way. That is simple as that. And with that, seeing it clearly like that, I'm able to have love for the person. I'm not condoning the behavior, but I am loving the person. But even when I look at and reflect back on that, it stimulated a problem which was inside of me. And the problem that I had with was with my stepfather. And a lot of it could have been because of my youth. I was in my, young age up to my teens, and then my adult years. But especially in my youth, it could have been just a lack of life experience, the lack of having a God in my life to see it differently. It could have been a few things.
Mhm.
But what I'm clear on looking back is what it was stimulating was I had a deficiency in compassion for others. I had an inability to distinguish behavior from the person or their humanity. And as I got older, I was able to correct that deficiency. And so now, even when I see people do things that are incredibly hurtful and harmful to others, I'm able to distinguish behavior from the person and still have humanity for them. That doesn't mean that that action is going to be free of consequences. Oh no, life doles out the consequences for your actions, but I'm not involved in that. Like you said, with outcome, that's somebody else's job. That's not my job. My job is to be loving and peaceful to everyone and treat them with compassion. So in that way, it stimulated that. And when I have didn't get a promotion or a job didn't go the right way, my mind tells me that's a problem. That's not the problem. I just didn't get the job or the promotion. The problem is that I was attached to it. And so it stimulated how I'm attached to things being a certain way, or it stimulated that I have expectations of the way that life is supposed to be. Our friend Tim did a really good job of when he went through his divorce. Like it was a lot of suffering and he shared this openly with you and I and said that we could share it if it would be instructive to other people. But his suffering was when he thought the relationship should go a different way. But when he did accept that they were going to have a divorce, his life completely changed. And it was in that moment he was able to work on what that stimulated in him. And what it stimulated in him was he had a fear of how other people would look at him as a failure in a relationship. That's what stimulated the problem inside of him. And that wasn't the only one. He also he acknowledged he had a fear of being alone. So it stimulated that. And so he stopped making it about his former spouse and started making it about an opportunity in which he could, resolve the problems within himself. And I think of the same thing. When I see people act in a way that is unconscious, it's not about them. When I see life shows up as a way, life is just indifferent. Life does what it does. Sun goes up and down, it doesn't go up and down. The sun is always there. The earth just revolves, And so, but when that thing in nature is happening and life and nature is just doing what it does, that's just life. It's how I respond to it, and it just continues to stimulate problems. And I just continue to brush up against these thorns until I take them out. And
that's exactly right. That's exactly
I've begun to not try to protect the thorn, as Michael Singer says in Untethered Soul, and rearrange my life so my thorn isn't touched. And I have all this nonsense going on, of not getting too close to people because I don't want to get hurt. It's not the people that will hurt you. It's you, it's inside that are trying to protect yourself from being hurt. So you never fully live and experience life. You never know what true connection is because you're so worried, like, well, one day they're going to die. Newsflash, we all are. No one's getting out of this alive, not the physical form. And so once that starts to happen, then there's a new dimension to consciousness that opens up.
That's right.
And that new dimension which is really beautiful. You start welcoming all the things that stimulate the problems inside of you so you can be rid of them once and for all. And then you start living an unconditional life, man.
The only way through the problem is through the problem too. And you're kidding yourself if you think you can hide and run away. You can't. And if you have this kind of approach we're talking about, it's easier to go through. It's still difficult, but it's easier to go through the problem knowing that the problem is not creating your issue. It's you creating the issue. If you can pull that stuff away so that there is no thorn in your hide, the problem is solved a little easier. Man, Keith, this is a great lesson. Yeah, as I was listening to you talk, there are so many wonderful examples. I would like to hire you to do to do seminars. I think it'd be great to doing it as a seminar leader. Have a reading list and a number of things to talk to people about. Have communication with the students, and then just do like role playing. Pretending creating a problem, having the group work through it, and it'd be a cool way to illustrate how you can solve some of these things by following the practice and doing some of the things you're recommending. I think it'd be great.
If I did a seminar, man, you'd be right there with me, man.
I'd film it for you. I'd film it.
No, I need you there, man, dropping knowledge and wisdom. But it's interesting that once I gave up that the solution was out there, but when it's in here, like you got to do the work. And once I did that and just really accepted it, it changed my life, man. It changed my experience of life. And it's just beautiful, man, to feel, I don't even want to use the word like empowered, just to feel free. I mean, that's
a good word, free. Yeah, to feel free from those constraints, that narrative. Yeah.
You're free from that narrative, man. And, when people, I tell people like, man, I haven't had a bad day in 6-7 years, man. I haven't. I mean, the ego has had some tussles. It's had some bad days. I mean, it's had some hard days. But man, it's like, no, it shouldn't be this way. Or why are they acting this way? Or life is so unfair. Like, it's had some bad. But dude, I haven't had a bad day, man. I've had some days that were like way up here. I've had some days that were at my baseline. But dude, my baseline is extraordinary. It's so peaceful there. So you know what I'm saying? Let's hang out at my baseline. Like, this is a great place to be, and so I've had those days, man. And it's a practice. Like, that's the thing. This little 10-minute ritual every morning is the access to experiencing it every single day. Rick, I mean, I don't know how long. I don't know when my little candlelight is going to blow out, man. I don't know when, but all I know is I'm committed to every day that thing continues to flicker, that I'm living my best life, man. And my best life is a peaceful one.
That's beautiful, Keith. That's beautiful.
It's peaceful, and just feel with me running around this little planet or my little neighborhood, just sprinkling kindness. That's all it is, man.
Baby, that's great. Isn't it? People who watch you when you're talking like this have to feel inspired and just thrilled to be in your presence. I mean, really, it's a really cool thing to see a guy who's really happy and work things out for himself. And I think all of us who watch want some of it. So just continue to watch the podcasts of Keith Jones, and you'll get a little fairy dust on you.
I keep saying, man, it's you, it's our friends, man. And I want more people to do a practice. It doesn't have to be this one.
That's true.
But to do a practice. And when do you know somebody doesn't have, it doesn't have to be, again, this one, but a practice in your life? Just watch their behavior. That's it. Like, it tells you everything you need to know, and when you watch it, you don't judge it. You just observe it. And that includes our own behavior. Like, we don't judge our own behavior. We just say, oh, okay. I lost consciousness for a second, but I'm back, and let's get back to the business of sprinkling kindness. Rick, I love you, man. Thank you again.
I love you, Keith. Have a great week, man. We'll see you next week.
I'll see you next week.